All right, back to those new developments out of South Carolina, that deadly police shooting there. From the just released dashcam video to that cell phone footage of his final breath, the killing of Walter Scott has been recorded. And that makes it very difficult from the vast number of deadly encounters by police. What's more here, despite the fact that police officers are public servants using publicly purchased firearms to protect the public, the federal government actually does not track the number of killings by police. Did you know that? That is where this website steps in. FatalEncounters.org is keeping count nationwide and also keeping count state by state. And for 2014, it found that more than 1,100 people were killed by a police officer. With me now, D. Brian Burkhart, who founded and now runs FatalEncounters.org. He is also the editor of the Reno News and Review. Also joining me is South Carolina native and contributor to The New Yorker, author Jack Hitt. So welcome to both of you.
Great to be here.
Thank you for having me.
You got it, to both of you. But Brian, let me just begin with you, because the obvious question is why not? Why is there no official record keeping of deadly encounters with police in this country?
Actually, the federal government has attempted to collect these numbers, but has never made it a priority to collect them, and has never had any real punishments for the people who don't submit for these numbers.
So you have been culling these numbers state by state. I mean, how are you getting your information? What conclusions have you arrived at thus far?
Well, we get our information from various ways. We do crowdsourcing, which means people submit incidents from their own hometowns. We also do public records searches, and we have a small team of people who hit state by state doing research on each individual state. We're about 30%, we think, collected. It's going to be 2 more years before our database is complete. We found some very interesting things. We find that people of color are represented at higher rates than they exist in the general population. We found that mentally ill people are killed at very high rates, up to 30%. There's just immense amount of data in this stuff.
Can I jump in here for a second and ask a question?
Yeah, go for it. Please do, Jack.
So Brian, I've read these CDC numbers, though, right? I mean, are those real, or I see this all over the place? The reports that about 2,100 whites have been killed by police between '99 and 2011, and about 1,100 blacks were killed. Are those legitimate numbers? I'm asking.
No, those CDC numbers are actually worse than the numbers that are collected by the Department of Justice. In the justifiable homicides reports that you've seen for years, the numbers are about, they average about 400 a year, when in truth the real numbers are upwards of usually over 1,000 per year. And all those, the problem with that is a lot of states, a lot of jurisdictions don't contribute. For example, with the Department of Justice numbers, the entire state of Florida didn't contribute to them.
Wow, I don't think a lot of people realize that. I'm glad you jumped in, Jack, and asked the question, because there are a lot of numbers floating out there. And to your point, what's real and what's not. Let me just pivot to you, because I read your piece in The New Yorker 2 times through. I just thought it was incredibly well put together, and it was a different perspective that maybe, and I'm even a Southerner, but that I wasn't expecting. I mean, you talk about how you grew up in Charleston, and first of all, on one level, you point out something with this story in South Carolina that maybe we haven't seen in the wake of Ferguson or what happened in Staten Island, that, as someone close to the mayor of North Charleston told you, before the sun was down that day when Walter Scott was killed, everyone was unified. I mean, you point out the mayor, the police chief, the governor, 2 senators, even a family member. Why do you think that happened here?
It's a question that needs to be answered. So, truly, like within 24 hours of that video coming out, the mayor had said, "When you're wrong, you're wrong." The police chief had met with the family, the governor, both senators, everybody piled on to say this was a terrible thing. the police officer was fired and charged with murder, and the victim's brother came out and said, we advocate change, not violence, right? So you have to ask yourselves, like, have we learned from Ferguson? Has all this public debate? We always talk about public debate actually sort of resolving in some way. So have we learned from Ferguson? Have we learned from Cleveland? Have we learned from Staten Island and done it right here in South Carolina? The thing that I throw in there is that actually there are 4 shootings in South Carolina in the last 3 years, and all of the law enforcement officials were fired and charged with felony or murder charges. One is a police chief even. So somehow in South Carolina, they have taken the kind of action that you saw in the last couple of days consistently over the last few years. Now, I say that in the context of our history, which is pretty brutal. South Carolina has certainly one of the worst track records in terms of racial violence in the entire country. But there is, in the piece, I tried to trace this little strand of fair play that actually sort of dates back even to some early parts of the Civil War. And comes up through Judge Waring, this famous mid-20th century judge, and all the way up until right now. Of course, all of this could change tomorrow, and it all could be crushed underfoot. That would be very much in South Carolina's history also. And expect, by the way, the demonization of Walter Scott and the hagiography of the police officer in the next few days as everybody tries to maneuver and set up the coming trial. So We'll have to watch the arc of this. But
will absolutely watch.
It seems like South Carolina got it right.
We will watch the arc. I'd love to have you back just from your lens as a South Carolinian. Jack Hitt of The New Yorker, thank you so much. And Brian Burkhart, if you want more information, his numbers, FatalEncounters.org is the website. Gentlemen, my thanks to both of you. Next, as we are learning more